Yeah, well, I think one of the lessons of the post 9/11 decade in the United States is that while the Bush administration overreacted in very extreme ways to the attacks that occurred on that day, what I think is more surprising really is the amount of pushback that he confronted and the fact that he was effectively forced to curtail virtually all of his most aggressive measures. And when you look at where that resistance was coming from, it wasn't coming from Congress, which was, said to the president, do whatever it takes. It wasn't really coming from the courts, which took only a handful of cases and issued very narrow opinions, not requiring the president to do much at all. It wasn't coming from the American people as a whole. President Bush's popularity increased dramatically after 9/11, and the people re-elected him to office in 2004, a stamp of approval. But there was nonetheless significant resistance, and the resistance, I think, came from organizations, civil society organizations, NGOs, groups like the American Civil Liberties Union, the Center for Constitutional Rights, Human Rights Watch, Human Rights First. And these organizations, because they consist of people who have come together around their commitment to constitutional and human rights, were willing to push back, and at a time when none of the formal structures of government were pushing back, and when the people as a whole were not pushing back. And I think that resistance was key in creating the pressures that ultimately led the Bush administration to curtail many of these measures. Well, they were filing lawsuits, which sometimes prevailed, surprisingly, as the Center for Constitutional Rights lawsuit in Guantanamo did. Sometimes didn't prevail, but nonetheless brought a great deal of attention to an issue by focusing concerns and articulating rights concerns that have been asserted. They issued reports, did investigative reports, and then issued reports and made them available on their websites, to the world at large. They went around the country doing education. They did grassroots organizing efforts, letter writing, demonstrations, local ballot initiatives, and the like. And they reached out to partners around the world to try to inform the responses of foreign governments to our action, because the victims of so many of the United States atrocities were not Americans but foreigners, and so Americans were not necessarily all that concerned, but those foreign communities from which these individuals came were. I think President Obama deserves actually quite a bit of credit for furthering the curtailments of these measures and bringing the counterterrorism measures more in line with legal principles. He closed the CIA's black sites and ended that practice. He officially ended the CIA's extraordinary interrogation tactic program, or torture. He released formerly secret memos that had authorized the torture so that it couldn't happen again. He insisted that his actions at Guantanamo should be governed by the laws of war, even when a court said that they weren't. He said to the court, "No, you've given me too much power." And he made a very important speech that talked about the importance of acting in fighting al-Qaeda within the frame of the rule of law and within the commitments to constitutional principle that define us as a nation, and argued that that actually makes us stronger. Whereas Bush had argued that these things are irrelevant, that they don't apply, that we're in a new world, and that we need not be bound by these same rights. So I think he changed the tone in a very important way, and he introduced some important reforms. He's not perfect. He has continued to rely on secrecy more aggressively than I think is warranted. He has opposed any form of accountability for the wrongs done in the name of security by his predecessors, and he has accelerated the targeted killing program using unmanned drones without providing any kind of transparent and public set of rules and regulations to ensure that those killings are being done pursuant to the laws of war, which do allow killing, but require that they be targeted at actual combatants and imminent threats and the like. And we just don't know at this point what the constraints are that he is operating under, and that's, I think, of serious concern both to the United States people. He's executed a U.S. citizen using this tactic, and to the world at large. Many people have been killed, and it may be that the vast majority of them were justified because they were fighting for Al-Qaeda against us in an ongoing military conflict. But we just don't know because the practice is so secret.